Welcome back to Lakeland. Paul Plack here for Aero-TV, sitting with Dan Gryder, who flies the Herpa DC-3. Dan, it's really, really cool to see that plane towering above everything else on the ramp just when we're walking around even after hours.
It's a neat-looking airplane. It's a pleasure to fly it here.
I have to ask you, before we even get into what Herpa is doing sponsoring the airplane, how you came to fly a DC-3.
Well, it came available as a freighter, and it seemed like a good idea at the time, but we bought it about 7 years ago, and I've been giving flight instruction in it, and that kind of just evolved into doing air shows with it.
Now, you are based in Atlanta, so what is your general radius? Where would people expect to see the plane during the course of the year?
Typically within 500 miles. We'll hit some of the smaller air shows within 400 or 500 miles.
And you will be in Oshkosh this summer?
Planning on being in Oshkosh, yes. Let's
talk about what happens when you bring this thing to an air show. First of all, tell us how the relationship with Herpa came about.
Herpa is a maker of die-cast models in Europe, and they had seen us at some point and wanted to know if they could buy a DC-3 and have me manage it for them. And I quickly convinced them. I said, you know, really the easiest thing, why don't you just use my airplane and you can decorate it however you want it, and we can make it say whatever you want, and then I'll crew it for you and take it wherever you want it to go, and be a lot cheaper and a lot easier. And they quickly realized that was probably the best solution. So that's the way that came about.
Okay, now is the paint job, was that designed by Herpa, and did they design the model first or the real thing first?
You know, that's an interesting story. We co-designed the model and the exterior surface at the same time, and we swapped the files via internet to make them match the airplane in the States and match the production process in Europe, until we both were satisfied with something that I could put on the airplane. And then we both went to work, and they built the models, and I converted the airplane, and it worked.
We're here in Lakeland talking with Dan Gryder of the Herpa DC-3. We'll be back with more in a moment. Aero-TV is brought to you by...
Today, there is an affordable, high-performance, easy-to-own and easy-to-operate very light jet designed with you in mind. Far less expensive than any other twin-engine jet to buy, it is also the least expensive to own and operate. It is the Eclipse 500. The jet that's easy to buy, easy to fly, and fun to own. The jet for you.
Dan, let's talk about the history of the DC-3 itself. This is a very storied plane. When young kids ask me what a DC-3 is, I tell them that if they've ever seen the Warner Brothers cartoons, classic cartoons from the 1940s, whenever they showed an airliner, it was generally based roughly on the shape of a DC-3. It's that well known.
Quite a hunk of aircraft. Look at that landing gear. I wonder what this one's for.
What's the heritage of this aircraft?
Well, the DC-3 started in the as designed in the late mid-1930s as an airliner, when America and the world needed a method of transporting people from point A to point B. And Donald Douglas designed the DC-1 as a clean sheet design. They had not designed anything like this before, and it competed against the Boeing 247, and it beat the 247, and they immediately went into mass production on the DC-2. So the airplane was so successful that Donald Douglas could not build them fast enough, and all operators worldwide had standing orders in for the DC-3, and it was a load-carrying, all-weather airplane, and it was, that's how come they built 14,000 of these eventually. Probably one of the most produced aircraft in the world, but very durable, and Donald Douglas had great success with it.
Let's talk about some of the technical details of its load-carrying capacity and performance. It's got two Pratt & Whitney, roughly 1,800 cubic inch engines. Tell us about the horsepower, the thrust, that kind of stuff.
Well, they were originally Wright-powered, and they were 1820s. And the DC-1, DC-2 had smaller engines, but the DC-3 that they really made it into production with were Wright 1820s, and they were also 1,200 horsepower. We have the Pratt 1830s, so it's 1,830 cubic inch, and it's 1,200 horsepower per side. And they came with engines all the way up through military use, 1,450 horsepower per side, but they were basically the same Pratt 1830 engine.
Now, when this thing was in use as a freighter, how much would it carry?
Depending on the fuel load, it could haul typically as much as 7,000 pounds of freight.
Flying it in today's environment, does it give away anything to the planes with modern avionics and all that sort of thing, or in the type of flying you do are the steam gauges just fine?
Well, you know, I cheat a little bit. I do have a Garmin 430 in there, but the rest of it's pretty original and pretty unique. But we fly this mostly by looking out the window like you would a J3 Cub. So if I've got an oil pressure indicator and an airspeed indicator, I'm happy. You know, if the rest of that stuff doesn't work, it doesn't really make any difference. The airplane doesn't know.
When it was in airline passenger configuration, how many seats did they put in these things?
At 10 rows of 3 for 30, plus a crew of 3, a captain, a co-pilot, and what they used to call a hostess in those days. And we still have the buttons up on either overhead with a little button you push that says "Call Hostess." And before they were flight attendants, you know, Douglas called them hostesses.
Aero-TV is brought to you by Cirrus aircraft have always been easy to fly. Now they're easier than ever to buy. A complete line of ownership programs gives you everything you need to purchase, trade, finance, lease, insure, and warranty your Cirrus. There's even an ownership program for non-pilots. The Cirrus Access Pilot can teach you how to fly or fly the plane for you. Find out more at www.cirrusdesign.com. Cirrus, for the love of flying.
Welcome back to Lakeland. Paul Plack here with Dan Gryder of the Herpa DC-3. We're talking now about using the DC-3 in air shows, and Dan, as you pointed out, technically you are not in the air show when the airspace is wavered, but you do exhibition flying, I guess is how you'd put it.
Well, we do our exhibition flying in the morning, and then here at Lakeland Sun Fun this year, we are in the air show. We're in the wavered airspace, and we do fly. This year we flew 3 air show slots in the actual air show. They're very short. They appear to be aerobatic routines, but they're not. And aerobatics is designed as, you know, excessive pitch or bank, and we don't break any of those pitch or bank angles, but it looks like it from the ground. And we do some other unusual things. We shut off an engine and make a low pass just to show what the aircraft will do, you know, with an engine shut down, make a flyby with one shut down, just for people that have never seen anything like that up close and in front of the crowd, in front of the camera, so you can see what this aircraft looks like. It's a transport category airplane, and it's designed to fly on one engine, and it flies beautifully on one engine. I've always said there's no reason we can't fly this on one engine.
All right, now, one of the things that leaves a lot of people talking about when they get home is the one-wheel landing and coming down the runway on one wheel. Now, I learned to fly in tail-wheel airplanes, and they taught us that kind of as a tactic to deal with crosswinds at times. But is there any difference to doing it in an airplane that big?
No, there's really not. In fact, the DC-3 is so stable, and a lot of people have looked at that and said the same thing. You know, isn't that dangerous, or why are you doing this? And I have to say the same thing. Why did the guy climb the mountain? We land on one wheel because we can. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. You know, as an interesting side note, the FAA called me after one of our deals, and they said, yes, we understood that you landed your DC-3 on one wheel and did a one-wheel touch and go. Is that true? And I said, yes, it is. And he said, oh, okay, well, thank you very much. You know?
What other things have you done with the DC-3 that have surprised people at air shows?
Just our what they call here, Wayne Boggs, the air boss, calls my yank and bank routine, which is kind of low-level maneuvering the aircraft. We just get 5 low passes very, very quickly. It's a very maneuverable aircraft, and we can literally turn it on a dime and turn the thing around, and it's a lot of fun to do. But it's at these light weights especially, it's extremely maneuverable, and we just have a lot of fun doing it.
Well, I have to say that based on what I've seen here, an awful lot of people get to see that Herpa logo by your flying it, and we really appreciate your being here to show us how this thing can perform.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
All right. We've been talking with Dan Gryder of the Herpa DC-3, and for Aero-News Network at Aero-TV, I'm Paul Plack.